Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider the news of the day. Let's begin with the Anti-Fake News Act. The government has retabled a bill to repeal the Anti-Fake News Act 2018 in Dewan Rakyat today. So this is after the first attempt to do so was rejected by Dewan Negara last September. So now Pakatan has another go at getting rid of this bill.
Yeah, so Melissa, it's an opportunity for us to understand how government works. In this instance, we learn again, perhaps for the first time, the way in which the Senate or the upper house has powers, but they only have powers to delay a bill. So now they've delayed the bill by a year, which means that after their deliberations and after they voted, even if they choose to now reject it, it still goes through, right?
Yeah.
So it goes through for royal assent. And that's how the government and the structures that we have operate.
Well, you know, earlier this month, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad said that the Anti-Fake News Act may be amended instead of repealed. And that raised all kinds of red flags for me because, you know, this is not a good law. I mean, this law has very vague definitions of what fake news is. In other words, it says news, information, data and reports which are wholly or partly false. I mean, that can be essentially anything. So I'm hoping to see this bill thrown out altogether without any amendments to it, and hopefully we'll be able to see that. However, we have had comments coming out from the Multimedia and Communications Ministry saying that there could be a formation of a parliamentary select committee in terms of looking at the misuse of social media.
Okay, so there is a genuine problem, and the question is, what is the solution? Is the solution going to come in the form of laws, legislation, police powers, or is it going to be through education and greater understanding, media literacy? I think for myself, and I imagine for you too, Melissa, what we don't want is an increase in censorship. We don't want the enabling of invasive forms of surveillance, and we certainly want to protect our privacy, whatever the solution we finally come up with.
You know, Sharaad, I don't necessarily agree with you that there is a problem. I think the problem is that we cannot define what the problem is. I mean, the understanding of what fake news is, and I use, you know, inverted commas because I don't quite like that term. I think that term is problematic. It's not quite false information, but rather in the Malaysian context, it seems to be more racially charged information. It's not about direct lies that can be fact-checked, but rather, you know, content that is used for emotional impact, less about false information. And I think the issue really is organized social media manipulation, and I think that is what we should be looking at. This is exactly what this Parliamentary Select Committee should be looking at, and where I do agree with you is I think that more legislation is not the silver bullet to this issue.
I'm always happy when Melissa agrees with me. Okay,
all right.
What do we have next?
Speaking of the Anti-Fake News Act, Datuk SALLEH KERUAK, the former Sabah UMNO big gun and ex-communications and multimedia minister who once justified the need for fake news legislation, he has applied to join PKR over the weekend. So I believe the latest is that PKR's political bureau said that they were going to weigh in on this and discuss this before making a decision. But I guess at the end of the day, Sharaad, there are no such thing. There's no such thing as permanent enemies or friends in politics.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a problem. It's a problem for the branding of certain organizations, especially if they built up their sort of raison d'etre based on the fight against corrupt politicians or authoritarian politicians and so on and so forth. So this issue, on one hand, is an issue of optics, but it's also an issue of real politics. And we wonder what the PKR position is going to be. Do you think, Melissa, if you were a betting person, what would you place your bets on? Is PKR going to admit SALLEH KERUAK into their ranks?
Oh, you're putting me on a spot there. I don't know whether they will, but I don't think they should, right? So for me, personally, I think that this whole kind of party hopping shouldn't be normalized. We shouldn't be tolerant of this kind of and accepting of party hopping, of changing party allegiances, because should MPs be free to change their political allegiances regardless of their pledges to their previous parties, the promises that they made to the people who elected them, the constituents. I don't think they should.
Well, in many countries, how that is resolved is that
you resign.
Well, no, the voters punish the hopping MP at the next election. So that's an opportunity for voters to vote somebody out. Now, that's what we have in our parliamentary system. But there are certain considerations, and I personally think, to put the question back to myself,
yes, what about you?
Do I think they're going to admit him? I think they will.
Ooh.
And I think because it's gone so far, that if they really didn't want to have him in, they would have killed the story much sooner. But they, I think, are giving themselves some time to lay the groundwork for justification of his entry into the party. Now, the question is what they're going to say. It could be that they will admit him as an ordinary member and then, deny him major positions. But that still leads to the question, how much influence will he have behind the scenes? So he might not have any official positions, but he could still be pulling the strings when it comes to politics in Sabah. And that is something that we need to wait to see.
Well, I'm not quite sure. He did lose with a margin of 4,000 votes in GE14, so he lost his parliamentary seat there. And I wonder whether he still has he wields that kind of influence that you speak of. My question is, what is his agenda? Does he have a comeback agenda? And I'm wondering whether the political bureau of PKR will be weighing all these things, including the optics of this. What will it look like for the party, which has been torn apart by, in-party bickering, whether this is something that they can afford and whether you want to give in to this kind of warlord culture?
Well, Sabah politics is a mystery to me, and I look forward to actually reading more about how things operate and why, in fact, the big man, the warlord, is still an important feature of politics there, and how that impacts, their democratic evolution. Yeah.
All right, on a positive note now, last Saturday, Farah Ann Hadi became the first Malaysian artistic woman gymnast to qualify for the Olympics after some 20 years. Now, she finished 16th out of 20 in the qualifying session of the individual all-round event at the World Championships in Stuttgart in Germany. So Farah Ann is only the third Malaysian gymnast to qualify for the Olympics. This is after Au Liyen in 2000 in Sydney and Shu Wai in 2004 in Athens.
Yeah, and this is a wonderful story. It's sort of a story that brings a smile to your face, because this is a Malaysian who, through sheer hard work and on an international stage where she gains no favors for being who she is or for where she is, purely on merit, purely on her talent and her hard work, that she has succeeded. I mean, she's not at the finish line yet,
but
even
making us proud. Yes,
even then, over a weekend which has been in many ways marred by extreme ethno-nationalist sentiments, this was a wonderful story for which people could genuinely come together across the political spectrum and say, we are Malaysian and proud of it.
Yes, I think there's nothing like sports to bring us together. Well, congratulations to Farah Ann for making us proud and for showing real dignity. You worked hard, you trained daily for years, you persevered despite the cyberbullying and the injuries you sustained, and you qualified to the Olympics on your own merit and talent. After this, we are going to take a closer look at other types of dignity, Sharaad. That's next on Consider This.